Hey, all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie, and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is a memoir entitled This Isn't Going to End Well, The True Story of a Man I Thought I Knew by Daniel Wallace. This book looks so unique and intriguing. Daniel Wallace, our author, becomes friends with his soon-to-be brother-in-law, William Neely, who becomes a famous cartoonist. Wallace adores Neely, who is about 6 years older than Wallace. Neely is one of those eternally cool guys, an adventurer, a risk taker, someone who can build anything and fix anything, one of those guys. Wallace meets Neely in the 70s when Wallace was only 12 years old. And then when Neely is 48 years old, he commits suicide. Wallace's memoir is the story of his friendship with Neely and what he uncovers after Neely's death. With the way the book sold itself on the back, it even tells you it's part love story and part true crime, I readily picked it up. It even states this. But when William took his own life at age 48, Daniel's heartbreak led him to commit a grievous act of his own, a betrayal that brought him down a path into the tortured recesses of William's past. Eventually, a new picture emerged of a man with too many secrets and too much shame to bear. I'm sold. Absolutely sold. And when I started reading it, I couldn't put it down at first. First, let me commend Wallace's writing style. It was quick and engaging and easy to read and suspenseful, all excellent elements when we talk about fiction or creative nonfiction. Wallace has this easygoing style of writing that places you right there in the scene. We can see it and feel it and most importantly, relate to it. Let me read you this as he is kind of describing what Neely means to him when he's still, 12 or 13. Part of growing up is pretending not to care about things you care about quite a lot. I pretended not to care whether he was here. Shrugging, lazy-eyed, laid back, I'd wave him in like a mob boss to his flunky. He'd be dressed in a variation of the same clothes he wore almost every day for his entire life. A t-shirt and jeans, tennis shoes or boots, hair pulled back in a ponytail, stuffed into one of his back pockets. A paperback. See, we can just feel it. Wallace states these truths about growing up that are so beautifully composed. Because Wallace met Neely when he was just 12 years old, Neely becomes a sort of role model, an idol for Wallace. Neely is the opposite of Wallace's father, and we learn that Mr. Wallace is not fond of Neely at all. When Wallace first meets Neely, Neely is standing on the Wallace house roof and jumps into the pool from the roof. It's an excellent picture, a fabulous scene to introduce us to the key characters in the story. Wallace uses relatively short chapters that mix his own life with that of Neely, and he includes Neely's drawings throughout the book in several different places, like this. Wallace has no clue what he wants to do with his life. Neely is somebody who lives each day with gusto. Neely and Holly, Wallace's sister, take Wallace to an Alice Cooper concert. Wallace does a great job at showing the reader how taken he was with Neely. As the story progresses, we learn some background information on Neely, limited, mind you, and then Neely marries Holly. Wallace tells us that his sister dies years after Neely commits suicide from a disease. I think it's the one where all the tissue in your body turns to bone. I remember seeing that TV movie about Bob Saget's sister years ago. But anyway, Neely becomes a caretaker for Holly, yet they seem to have this happy lifestyle. Wallace doesn't always keep in touch with Neely as he grows up. He starts writing after Neely has much success at publishing books of his drawn maps and publishing his cartoons and such. Let me read you this about how Wallace writes of Neely's success. This should be the easiest chapter in the book to write, but it's not. It's one of the hardest. Even though, or maybe because, it's where all the good things happen. I want it to be the last chapter where I somehow eke out that rare and elusive happy ending. But I know how this is going to end, no matter how many of his dreams come true. That's why all the applause he gets, all the kudos, the public recognition an artist can never count on but can only hope for, comes off as sort of flat to me. And maybe why it didn't inspire or delight him very much either. I think he knew how it was going to end as well. It's supposed to be the chapter of the victory lap, the rising crescendo of the audience going wild, a montage of pure joy, the part of the story where you realize that it's all been worth it. This is supposed to be that moment. Wallace has this great way of creating suspense and making you want to read on. Then enters another prominent character in the book, Edgar Hitchcock. He writes and is a lot like Neely, at least in spirit. Hitchcock has scoliosis and is very fragile physically. He barely survived the surgery when he was younger, so he lives on the edge every day. He also does drugs. When Wallace introduces Hitchcock, he once again dangles that suspense in front of his readers by writing this: he's going to die soon, and his death will mark the beginning of the end of this story. After Edgar, William won't be far behind. This reads like one of those limited series that's based on a true story with all its twists and turns and intriguing characters. Edgar goes missing, and when his body is found, it's obvious he was murdered. I won't give away all the details, but Neely becomes obsessed with finding the murderer and goes kind of off the deep end himself. He doesn't act like himself anymore. And then a couple years later, he kills himself. After Holly dies, about a decade after Neely, Wallace cleans out her place and finds Neely's journals. Not all of them, for it appears as though some have been tossed. Wallace decides to keep the journals and later will read them, which will reveal the true Neely. I won't spoil it all for you, but here's my problem with the book. There's no big reveal. Nothing. Even Wallace's supposed betrayal of Neely that was mentioned on the back of the book is not all that shocking either. It's heartbreaking, but it's not this massive betrayal. When you sell a book in such a fashion, I was expecting Wallace to find out that Neely had some second family somewhere, that he had bodies buried under his house, or that he was a Russian spy. I even thought Neely might have killed Hitchcock. Essentially, what Wallace finds out is that Neely was not the cool dude that Wallace thought he was. There isn't any earth-shattering secret. Obviously, if Neely committed suicide, he must have been struggling with mental illness and at times substance abuse as well. And I understand Wallace's anger at Neely for taking his life and leaving his sister to fend for herself. While the story is interesting, there isn't some big twist or secret that is revealed in Neely's journals. Wallace even writes how he's surprised Neely didn't kill himself sooner. So I'm really expecting something monstrous. Yes, there is trauma in Neely's past, some crushing childhood experiences, which Wallace shares with us. But it's just not what I was expecting, especially since the secrets happened when he was a child and not in control of his life or able to make his own decisions. I understand that Neely's suicide was probably very jarring for Wallace. And then when he read the journals and realized that Neely wasn't this hip guy that Wallace always thought he was, it was probably an incredibly profound moment, so much so that it became the book we are reading. And it is so worthy of a story, no question about it. And it's well written. My issue is with how it was packaged and what it appeared to be set to deliver. Maybe I just have an overactive imagination. This isn't going to end well, just wasn't the shocking twist that I thought it might be. However, Wallace does an excellent job at revealing and writing and describing all those layers of emotions, the idolization, the anger, the sadness, and finally acceptance as he reconciles his memories ultimately with realities. Wallace reminds us that people we love aren't always the people we think they are. We all carry around secrets and burdens and some sort of trauma. We base our opinions about others on our perspectives of them, not necessarily who they are or who they ever were. This isn't going to end well as a good reminder that just because we think of someone a certain way doesn't mean that that is who that person is. It's a great read. Just don't make the same mistake I did and expect some seedy plot twist. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.